we're never in direct contact with reality, whatever it is, unless that reality is consciousness, right? So we're only ever experiencing consciousness and its contents.
Right.
And then the question is, how does that circumstance relate to, quote, reality at large? And Donald Hoffman is somebody who's happy to speculate, well, maybe there isn't a reality at large. Maybe it's all just consciousness on some level. And that's interesting. That runs into, to my eye, various philosophical problems that, or at least you have to do a lot. You have to add to that picture, in that picture of idealism. That's usually all the whole family of views that would just say that the universe is just mind or just consciousness at bottom. Will go by the name of idealism in Western philosophy. You have to add to that idealistic picture all kinds of epicycles and kind of weird coincidences, and to get the predictability of our experience and the success of materialist science to make sense in that context, right? And so the fact that what does it mean to say that there's only consciousness at bottom, right? Nothing outside of consciousness, because no one's ever experienced anything outside of consciousness. There's no scientist has ever done an experiment where they were contemplating data, no matter how far removed from our sense bases, whether it's they're looking at the Hubble deep field, or they're smashing atoms, or whatever tools they're using, they're still just experiencing consciousness and its various deliverances, and layering their concepts on top of that. So that's always true, and yet that somehow doesn't seem to capture the character of our continually discovering that our materialist assumptions are confirmable, right? So you take the fact that we unleash this fantastic amount of energy from within an atom, right? We have the theoretical suggestion that it's possible, right? To come back to Einstein, there's a lot of energy in that matter, right? And what if we could release it, right? And then we perform an experiment at, in this case, the Trinity test site in New Mexico, where the people who are most adequate to this conversation, people like Robert Oppenheimer, are standing around not altogether certain it's going to work, right? They're performing an experiment. They're wondering what's going to happen. They're wondering if their calculations around the yield are off by orders of magnitude. Some of them are still wondering whether the entire atmosphere of Earth is going to combust, right? That the nuclear chain reaction is not going to stop. And lo and behold, there was that energy to be released from within the nucleus of an atom. And that it's just what the picture one forms from those kinds of experiments, and just the knowledge is just our understanding of evolution, just the fact that the Earth is billions of years old and life is hundreds of millions of years old, and we weren't here to think about any of those things. And all of those processes were happening, therefore, in the dark. And they are the processes that allowed us to emerge, from prior life forms in the first place. To say that it's all that nothing exists outside of conscious minds of the sort that we experience, it just seems, like a bizarrely anthropocentric claim, analogous to, the moon isn't there if no one's looking at it, right? I mean, the moon as a moon isn't there if no one's looking at it. I'll grant that, because that's already a kind of fabrication born of concepts. But the idea that there's nothing there, that there's nothing that corresponds to what we experience as the moon, unless someone's looking at it, that just seems just a way too parochial way to set out on this journey of discovery. So,
There is something there. There's a computer waiting to render the moon when you look at it. The capacity for the moon to exist is there.
right.
So
Right.
if we're indeed living in a simulation, which I find a compelling thought experiment, it's possible that there is a kind of rendering mechanism, but not in a silly way that we think about in video games, but in some kind of more fundamental physics way.
And we have to account for the fact that it renders experiences that no one has had yet, that no one has any expectation of having. It can violate the expectations of everyone lawfully, right? And then there's some lawful understanding of why that's so. It's like, I mean, just to bring it back to mathematics, like certain numbers are prime whether we have discovered them or not, right? Like there's the highest prime number that anyone can name now, and then there's the next prime number that no one can name, and it's there, right? So it's like it's to say that our minds are putting it there, that what we know as mind in ourselves is in some way, in some sense, putting it there. That like that the base layer of reality is consciousness, right? That we're identical to the thing that is rendering this reality. There's some, hubris is the wrong word, but it's like it's like it's okay if reality is bigger than what we experience, and it has structure that we can't anticipate and that isn't just. I mean, again, there's certainly a collaboration between our minds and whatever's out there to produce what we call, the stuff, of life. But it's not the idea that it's. I don't know. I mean, there are a few stops on the train of idealism and kind of New Age thinking and Eastern philosophy that I don't, philosophically, I don't see a need to take. I mean, the place, experientially and scientifically, I feel like you can get everything you want, acknowledging that consciousness has a character that can be explored from its own side, so that you're bringing kind of the first person experience back into the conversation about what is a human mind and what is true. And you can explore it with different degrees of rigor, and there are things to be discovered there, whether you're using a technique like meditation or psychedelics, and that these experiences have to be put in conversation with what we understand about ourselves from a third-person side, neuroscientifically or in any other way.
But to me, the question is, what if reality? The sense I have from this kind of, you play shooters.
No.
There's a physics engine that that's pretty.
I have. You mean first-person shooter games?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, not often, but yes.
I mean, there's a physics engine that generates consistent reality, right? My sense is the same could be true for our universe, in the following sense, that our conception of reality, as we understand it now in the 21st century, is a tiny subset of the full reality. It's not that the reality that we conceive of that's there, the moon being there, is not there somehow. It's that it's a tiny fraction of what's actually out there. And so the physics engine of the universe is just maintaining the useful physics, the useful reality, quote unquote, for us to have a consistent experience as human beings. But maybe we, descendants of apes, are really only understand like 0.0001% of actual physics of reality. Like this, we can even just start with the consciousness thing, but maybe our minds we're just too dumb by design.
Oh, yeah, I that truly resonates with me, and I'm surprised it doesn't resonate more with most scientists that I talk to. I mean, when you just look at you look at how close we are to chimps, right? And chimps don't know anything, right?
Yeah.
Clearly, they have no idea what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And then you get us, but then it's only a subset of human beings that really understand much of what we're talking about in any area of specialization. And if they all died in their sleep tonight, right, you'd be left with people who might take 1,000 years to rebuild the internet, or if ever.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, literally, it's like and I would extend this to myself. I mean, there are areas of scientific specialization where I have either no discernible competence. I've spent no time on it. I have not acquired the tools. It would just be an article of faith for me to think that I could acquire the tools to actually make a breakthrough in those areas. Um, and I mean, your own area is one. I mean, I've never spent any significant amount of time trying to be a programmer,
Mm-hmm.
but it's pretty obvious I'm not Alan Turing, right? It's like if that were my capacity, I would have discovered that in myself. I would have found programming irresistible. My first false starts in learning, I think it was C. It was just, I bounced off. It's like, this was not fun. I hate trying to figure out what the syntax error that's causing this thing not to compile was just a fucking awful experience. I hated it, right? I hated every minute of it. So it was not, so if it was just people like me left, like, when do we get the internet again, right? And we lose the internet. When do we get it again, right? When do we get anything like a proper science of information, right? You need a Claude Shannon or an Alan Turing to plant a flag in the ground right here and say, all right, can everyone see this? Even if you don't quite know what I'm up to, you all have to come over here to make some progress. And there are hundreds of topics where that's the case. So we barely have a purchase on making anything like discernible intellectual progress in any generation. And yeah, I'm just Max Tegmark makes this point. He's one of the few people who does in physics. If you just take the truth of evolution seriously, right, and realize that there's nothing about us that has evolved to understand reality perfectly. I mean, we're just not that kind of ape, right? There's been no evolutionary pressure along those lines. So we are making do with tools that were designed for fights with sticks and rocks, right? And it's amazing we can do as much as we can. I mean, you and I are just sitting here on the back of having received an mRNA vaccine.
Yes.
That has certainly changed our life, given what the last year was like, and it's going to change the world if rumors of coming miracles are borne out. I mean, if it's now seems likely we have a vaccine coming for malaria, right, which has been killing millions of people a year for as long as we've been alive. I think it's down to like 800,000 people a year now because we've spread so many bed nets around, but it was like 2.5 million people every year. It's amazing what we can do, but yeah, if in fact the answer at the back of the Book of Nature is you understand 0.1% of what there is to understand, and half of what you think you understand is wrong, that would not surprise me at all.